Hi, I'm Rich Hill. I'm the CEO, founder, and all those funky titles for Mind Doodle. I'm also an England fan. As you can see from my shirt, I support the national team. I'm patriotic, and like most people in the country, I think I could be England manager if it wasn't for the fact that I was an IT CEO. Obviously, I couldn't be. Gareth Southgate knows much more about football, apart from the fact that he's an ex-player, has experience as a manager, has all the badges, etc. But it doesn't stop me, like most people in the country, thinking about the England team and how we're going to get on at the World Cup. We've been playing around with a SWOT analysis tool. It's still in development, probably going to be released around about mid-July. So as I record this video, this isn't available for people to play around with. So it's just me having a bit of fun, looking forward to the World Cup. So like everything in Mind Doodle, we start off with a mind map. It's a really natural way to think. It allows you to explore your ideas in a non-linear fashion, and often you think of things that you wouldn't have thought of if you were just writing a list on a piece of paper. It's a very nice way to do SWOT analysis, because instead of going straight into whether something's a strength or weakness, etc., you're just thinking, and then afterwards you do your analysis. So hopefully it will yield better results. But anyway, let's just go through the mind map. I'm going to do this quickly because I don't want to do too much detail, because otherwise I'll end up talking about the same things twice when I get to the SWOT analysis. So here's my mind map. In the centre I've got my SWOT England team, and then I've got my initial ideas here, so Champions League and several other ideas coming off of that. Same with the Premiership, our National League, Russia as the host country, some thoughts on the current team, and to be honest, this could be a complete mind map all by itself. It could be what we would call sub-doodle, but if I were to do that, this would be a 2-hour video. I'm hoping it gets down to 10 or 15 minutes. The media, they always have a big impact on the squad. They've got a tough job because there's not actually that much to talk about. Even if we were to go and win the World Cup, there's only 7 games in a whole month. There's only so much football to talk about, so they have to look for other things, and that can be distracting. And then, of course, the draw. Sometimes you get a group of death. We've been quite lucky, but let's wait until we get through to the SWOT analysis to discuss that in more detail. Okay, so that's the mind map. I am going to add a couple of new ideas. So Gareth Southgate, one of the things I like about him is that when he took the job, he didn't look too happy. I mean, I'm not saying he looked sad or annoyed or frustrated to have been given a position. He is clearly pleased about it. But often in the past with managers, you kind of get the impression that they think they've already achieved something just by getting the job. And Southgate understands that it was just the start of a journey and there's a lot of work to do. And in fact, the team he's chosen reflects that, because a lot of people view the squad as a young squad, and rightly so. It's got some very young players in there. I think it's the lowest average age for an England squad going into a World Cup for years, if not ever. So he understands what's involved. But there's a couple of things about Gareth that I like. One is that he is an ex-player. He had 57 caps for England. Relatively recently, considering he's in a management position, he's part of the 96 team that got to the semi-finals of the Euros, and obviously famously missed the penalty, and then had a great career in commercials. I also like the fact that he worked with the under-21 team, because a lot of the players who are now playing for England or in the squad, like Rashford for example, he would have done, he'll have worked with before. And that's one of the biggest problems for national managers, is they only get a short amount of time, especially in comparison with club managers. So I think that is definitely an advantage. And also the fact that he's been part of the FA and the whole system, he knows St George's. And just adding on to that, because it's sort of relevant, is youth team winners. So last year, the under-17s team got to the final of the European Championship and lost on penalties to Spain. And then about 3 or 4 months later, they got to the final of the World Cup and they won. And this time they didn't need penalties. They even went 2-0 down, but they came back and won 5-2, and they played some incredible football, really nice, modern, progressive football. So that's good for England, but perhaps a little bit too soon for this tournament. And the under-19s also won the World Cup. So in terms of turning a corner. Maybe the FA and its initiatives and the new training centre at St George's have turned a corner. It seems to be positive. But I say, a lot of people think we're maybe just a little bit too early, so maybe 2 or 4 years' time. The vast majority of the squad will also be playing or available to be played in 2 or 4 years' time. Now that I've done my brainstorming, I'm going to look at the SWOT analysis. One thing to note before I go to the SWOT screen is that everything's colour coded, and that's easy to change. You can just click on the colour icon and change them as you wish. But that follows through to the SWOT analysis page. So let's go to SWOT. So all the ideas initially are in this unassigned column, and then we have the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. And to do the analysis is really straightforward. You can just drag over your ideas. It's worth noting that you don't necessarily want to drag over all of your ideas. Champions League, for example, is one of the first ideas to come off the central hub, and it in itself isn't necessarily a strength or weakness, opportunity or threat, but it's a conduit to the ideas that come next. So it's part of the free thinking, mind mapping process, but it isn't necessarily a SWOT item. The other thing to remember when you do SWOT analysis is that strengths and weaknesses are internal and opportunities and threats are external. So things like the Premiership, the FA itself, are things that we as a nation have control over. So those are internal. So things relating to that are going to be strengths and weaknesses. And anything that's external, so the World Cup itself, playing in Russia, is going to be external. So you can see I've already done some already. So I've got here under strengths, great managers in the Premiership. That's hard to argue against. I think it's probably the best group of managers we've had, even without Wenger retiring. Jose is obviously world class. Pep Guardiola, Jurgen Klopp, Pochettino, and the new guy at Arsenal, Unai Emery. Interesting to see how he gets on. But all the way down the league, we've got some fantastic managers. I particularly like Eddie Howe, for example, and see him as a potential England manager. Liverpool in the CL final, that is a strength. And there's more Champions League ones to come as well. A young team, I see that as a strength. And the fact that we have youth team winners, that's obviously very positive. And these all relate to things that we have control over. When talking about the Champions League, there is a case that should go into opportunities or threats. But I actually think our performance in the Champions League is under our control in the sense that we can make our team stronger. Obviously, we're still reliant on other teams in Europe. As Barcelona, Bayern Munich, Real Madrid to get better, it's more difficult. Weaknesses. Our only win is 1966. Now this is an interesting one because I've got Wikipedia here. That still puts us in pretty elite company. Obviously, Brazil, Germany, and Italy are significantly ahead. But apart from that, there's only Argentina and Uruguay who won it more than us. And Uruguay won the first 2 ever World Cups. So we didn't even compete then, so it's a little bit misleading. France and Spain obviously done much better than us in the last 20 years, and yet they still only have 1 World Cup each. But it's still a weakness, because we're not in that elite group. There's not that same sort of advantage of history. Brazil have a fear factor, so do Germany, so do Italy, even though Italy aren't in the World Cup this year. Fatigue due to winter break, straightforward. All the other European leagues have a winter break, we don't. There are plans for one. It's going to be a staggered approach, so teams will play one weekend, then have a break, and then while they're having a break, the other half teams will play. But it doesn't help us now, so that's definitely a weakness. Less experience due to youth, definitely a weakness. But there's a flip side to that. There's less fear. We'll come to that in a moment. And this is quite important actually. We've only ever been in one semi-final away from home, and that was in Italia 90. And when we lost on penalties to Germany, Waddle hit the post, And that is also interesting because if we'd won that World Cup, we would have been on 2 World Cups, and at the time, so would Germany. Germany ended up winning it and went to 3, and then obviously last time round we got their 4th. So history could have been completely different. Opportunities. So If we get through, actually, this can almost be in the opposite order, but it's done alphabetically. But so let's start this one first. So we have got a reasonably easy group. Belgium are obviously tough. They've got an incredible squad, but not necessarily the best team. Same sort of thing's been said about England numerous times over the years. And if we get through the group and even become second, because being in Belgium's group, that's a possibility, we're still going to get a really busy, nice first round game. It gets more difficult after that, but we'll come back to that in a moment. And then threats. Big country, lots of travel, something to be wary of. Hot weather, again, World Cups are obviously often hot, but we're not in Qatar yet, so 4 years' time will be incredibly interesting. This is the biggest threat for me. Likely to play Brazil or Germany in the quarter-final, and as we just saw, they're the most successful nations in the World Cup. I also put in media trash stories. This has already started. I feel sorry for Raheem Sterling. I think he's essentially a good lad. I think he's been harshly treated and doesn't help anyone. And transfer speculation is a threat, but actually doesn't seem to be much going on at the moment. There is lots of transfer talk, but not about English players. It seems to be mainly foreign players who might come to the Premiership. Anyway, that's what I've done so far. And if you look at the chart, you can see we've already started to build something up. So we have a nice 3D graph here. Clearly labelled SWOT. You can zoom it around. And it also tells you whether it's internal or external, and positive and negative. So a strength is both internal and positive, a threat is external and negative. And if you zoom it around, that becomes really apparent. So let's carry on doing our analysis. Well, let's go through these. And some of these, as I said before, we're not actually going to do anything with. We're just going to leave where they are. So 5 teams played in the CL this year. I think that's a strength. 57 caps for England. If I click on here, you can see that relates to Gareth Southgate. This is one of the things with mind maps, that because you sort of branch out as you do your thinking, you don't necessarily know what the parent is when you see them in isolation. So we've included the parent one here. But anyway, I think that's an advantage, it's a strength. Can't handle pressure when it matters. Young team. Yeah, that's a weakness, clearly, but I don't know what's going to happen, but we'll come back to that later on. So current team, we're going to ignore, say, withdraw. Gareth Southgate, I think he's great. He's a strength. Harry Kane. Now, actually, I've got a lot of sub-ideas coming off of Harry Kane, so I'm going to leave that as is, and we'll go through each one individually. History, again, is really a route to other ideas. Close to 30 goals per year for the last 3 years. That's a strength. I'm going to talk a little bit about Harry Kane now, because I don't quite understand him. Statistically, he's fantastic. So he scored 30 goals this year, was narrowly beaten by Mo Salah, and perhaps would have pushed him further if he'd not been injured. Previous 2 years, he was a top goal scorer. Last calendar year, he scored 55 goals across all competitions, including England games, which was more than anyone else in Europe, so more than Ronaldo, Messi. And yet, when I look at him, I don't see him as a modern-day football player. I see him as an old-fashioned striker. I don't think he's particularly fast. I don't think his movement's particularly good. I do think he's got an incredible finish. He can really strike a ball, and he's good in the air. I don't understand how he keeps scoring goals, but he does. So, I'm going to go over the stats, and I hope that my concerns over him aren't going to be founded. Now, this is a fear for me. He doesn't score in August. I mean, it's incredible. He keeps on not scoring a Premiership in August, and then he'll score 8 goals or something in September. So is he a slow starter? Is it the extra heat in the summer? Both of which are going to be problems at the World Cup, because it's only a month long. You can't afford to be a slow starter. Having said that, he scored in the last friendly. England playing tonight, so you'll probably be watching this video after tonight's game, so maybe he'll score a hat-trick tonight, and I'll be thinking, well, what am I worried about? But anyway, I'm still going to put that down as, so not strength, a weakness. Yeah. Poor track record in the Euros. Yeah, that's definitely a weakness. All relates to the same thing. But he's only had one tournament. He's still relatively young. I think he's only 24, maybe 25. He's now the England captain, and he's played 2 more seasons since the Euros. He's done well in the Champions League, so it is a weakness, but I think he can overcome it. You certainly couldn't call it a strength. Right, less pressure from media for this World Cup. That's an opportunity. Sometimes it's really, really difficult because of the pressure, and also the boredom. I sort of hinted before that the media haven't got that much to talk about or write about over the potential 7 games in a month. There's a lot of downtime for the England players as well, and if they keep reading things in the papers and online, social media, etc., it can't help. Less supporters will travel. Right. I'm not really sure what to do with that, really. I'm going to say it's a threat. I mean, I don't think it's a particularly large threat. I just think there'd be slightly less support in the stadia. I guess there's less likelihood of hooligan trouble. That's a separate idea, so I'm just going to put it down as a threat, but it'll be a minor one. Man City quarter-finals in the Champions League, that's a strength. If Liverpool hadn't beaten them, I'm sure they would have beat Roma and they would have been in the final. So they're Liverpool, and they've got a bigger squad than Liverpool, so they may have coped better with a major injury like Salah, so maybe they would have won it. I still don't think Real Madrid are as strong as 3 back-to-back Champions Leagues suggest. Certainly not this year. I think they were lucky against Bayern Munich, they were lucky against Juve, a little bit lucky against Paris Saint-Germain, and again Neymar was injured in that, and yet they kept on doing it, so it's hard to argue against. So media is like a higher category idea, I ignore that. Wags, it's a threat, but again I don't think it's a major one, because I don't know, this time round doesn't seem to be as many high profile wives or girlfriends. There's no Victoria Beckham, there's no Cheryl Cole, etc. Right, PL, so Premier League, most competitive league in Europe. Absolutely. If you look over the last 5-6 years, no teams won it back to back. It's been won by Chelsea, by Man City, by Leicester. It's incredible, really. The Spanish league is usually one of 2 teams. Atletico have sort of got involved recently. You go back 10-15 years when Rafa was there, Valencia also, but really, it's a 50-50 shout. In Spain, Bayern Munich are almost certainly going to win the Bundesliga. Dortmund won it twice in recent history, but even that's a few years ago. Juve have won the Italian League 6 years, so I'd say we are much more competitive. Potential hooligan trouble, it's obviously a threat because that will affect things. I think in Russia it's very difficult to tell. I think there's going to be a lot of hooligans who'd want to have fights with England fans, but I also think that Putin will be on top of it because it's a showcase to the rest of the world and he won't want bad press. So my suspicion is it'll be okay, but I'm not privy to the inner workings of the Russian police, so we'll have to wait and see. SWOT England team obviously is nothing really, it's just a starting point. Under 21 manager, that's a strength. Unity in squad, right. If there is unity in the squad, then this is definitely a strength. But again, from the outside, it's impossible to tell. All England teams say this is the best squad I've ever been a part of, or England players rather. But we know that there's often problems. Famously, the golden generation, who are now pundits, have been explaining recently how there were cliques and the Man U players didn't get on as well with the Liverpool players or the Chelsea players. I don't sense that there's that same sense of rivalry now, but I don't know. But I'm going to assume the best. Usually lose on penalties. Right. Now the obvious thing here is to put this down as a weakness or a threat. But I'm going to be slightly controversial because I'm going to say it's an opportunity. Because all my lifetime as a supporter, the first World Cup I can remember is 1986, and we didn't lose on penalties then, or but we did in 1990. So 1990 is the first penalty shootout I remember, and obviously we lost. It can't get any worse. I think we've gone out of 5 or 6 major tournaments and penalties. It can't get any worse. It's only an opportunity to get better. And it's strange penalties. And I draw the analogy with, I don't know, a carpenter. And if you said to a carpenter, here's a nail, and I've just tapped into a piece of wood, here's a hammer, and you've got one attempt to hit it down straight. That's what a carpenter does all day long. And professional footballers, most of whom will have joined academies aged 8, so they've been playing football for 12, 15, maybe 20 years. The idea of kicking a ball 12 yards into a reasonably large target, yeah, how is that difficult? Now obviously we know why it's difficult, because there's 50, 60,000 people watching, half of them are booing, there's, you know, 500 million people watching on TV, friends, family, but yeah, my thinking is it can't get any worse, because our default is if we're in the knockout round and we draw, we effectively lose. So it's an opportunity for us to get better. And I have read some very encouraging things that the FA, not just for the senior team but across the youth teams, have really changed their approach. They've tried to work on the psychology. They're talking to players in advance to see how they feel about penalties. Ask them if they want to practice, because some people prefer to, some people prefer not to. So it's an opportunity. I may be one of the few people in the country who think that. Lastly, world-class opposition in the Premiership and the Champions League. Well, that is a strength, because our players get to play against the very best. There is a counter-argument, because we have a relatively low percentage of homegrown players in the Premiership. It's much tougher for an English player to break into the Premiership, and that goes for all the home nations, you know, whether you're Scottish or Welsh or Northern Irish. But they get to play against really, really good players. And I say, going back to the Champions League thing, we had 5 teams in the Champions League this year. Chelsea probably did as well as they could have done. They lost to Barcelona, you know, an excellent team. Spurs were a bit unlucky, and as I touched on before, Liverpool made the final, and if they hadn't beaten Man City, I'm pretty sure Man City would have won the final, and they may well have actually won it, because they've got a better, deeper squad than Liverpool. Right, what have I missed out? Less fear due to youth. I'd say that's well, it is. I say it's an opportunity, because it's something we can change. I mean, it's obviously a strength, but as well potentially, and it is internal. But I just think there's an opportunity to apply ourselves in a foreign environment, an external environment, with less fear. And I do think there's been a lot of hang-ups for past England teams where previous failures have played their minds, and we've got one of the youngest squads going to the World Cup, certainly for England, but I think full stop. Anyway, anything else in here? No, I think these are all, obviously this is the root idea, but these are the ones that are quite high up, so the first level ideas. Anyway, let's see what's done to the chart. Well, here you go. You can now see your chart, and it's changed. Now, the other thing that we can do with our SWOT tool is we can take it one stage further, and we can actually do an advanced analysis. So if I click on advanced, we now have a new tab, which is obviously strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, and we can actually start sort of assigning some extra values. So great managers in the Premiership, how important is that? So these are between 1 and 5, and I'd say that's 4. I think that's very important. And then the rating for strengths and weaknesses is almost like a comparison. So how does that compare to the other leagues? It's at least a 2, maybe a 3. I certainly don't think any league's got a better group of managers than us. Yeah, so I'm going to say that's a 3. Yeah, I'm going to go over 3. I think that's a real advantage. World-class opposition in Premiership and Champions League. Right, let's say, I think that's also 4. I'm going to say that's a rating of 2 though, because I think there's, you know, the top leagues have that as well, Spain, Germany and Italy, and also they get to play against the best teams in the Champions League. Right, let's just see what that's done to the chart. Here you go. So you can see now that these have got bigger. So this one is great managers, and the maths is easy. It's 5 times 3, so the maximum is 15, and I think this was 4 times 3, so that gave us 12. And this is 8, so that's 4 times 2. what I'm going to do now is go through the rest of these. I'm not going to video it because otherwise this will become a long video, and then we'll come back and review this in a moment. I've now gone through all the tabs and I've given them ratings basically, so importance and rating for strengths and weaknesses. And it works slightly differently for opportunities and threats, because for opportunities and threats it's still importance, but it's the likelihood, so how likely is it this is going to happen, and again that's a 1 to 3 comparison. Same for threats. Whereas for weaknesses and strengths, there's no question about whether it's likely to happen because it's your actual situation. These are your strengths or your weaknesses. But the rating is really, like I said, a sort of comparison about how that compares to your competition. So in this case, France, Germany, Brazil, etc. So let's see what's happened to the chart. Now you see we've got a lot more sort of diversity in the size of the balls, and this allows us to identify quickly the things we need to concentrate on. It's also possible to sort of zoom in, so if I click on S and zoom in, you just see the strengths. So you can see I put Gareth Southgate quite highly, put around here. We've got these nice sort of labels as well, gives you a bit more information so you can see the weight. So you can go through and analyse this. Let's look at our weaknesses. So I think our biggest weaknesses are fatigue due to winter break and 1966 early win. Harry Kane poor track record is kind of up there, but not that big because I think he's 2 years older, 2 years more experienced, 2 years smarter. And I say I'm going on the fact that the stats don't lie, despite what my eyes show me. Opportunities, right. Reasonably easy group, it's very large, light to avoid, top team in the first knockout round, very good. I've also, like I said, put penalties in here because it can only possibly get better. I think less fear due to youth is definitely important, not as important as a reasonably easy group. I just think we've seen with Trent Alexander-Arnold, for example, he's 19, broke into the Liverpool team beginning of the previous season, and this year he's made a shirt his own and he's been fantastic. He's played in a Champions League final, he was targeted by Roma, he's targeted by Man City, targeted by Real Madrid, and he's stood up to the challenge. And if he can do it, why can't everyone else? And again, Gareth Southgate's a very good manager. He'll know the youth players, or the younger players rather, from his youth team management experience. So I don't think it's too bad. And then threats, again, zoom in. So the biggest one is if we get through to the quarterfinals, which I'd really expect us to do, we're going to play Brazil or Germany. Now, I'm not saying we're going to lose, but it's going to be tough. And there's an opportunity. Often you see teams that win the World Cup not start off brilliant. They sort of grow into a tournament. And that's what England would need to do. They need to navigate through the group stage, do well, obviously, in the first knockout round, and gain some momentum, some confidence, some belief, and a bit of a, well, why not, you know. The other things, like media trash stories, I say there's this Raheem Sterling thing. I think, even though he's very young, Raheem, he became a Liverpool player before going to Man City at a very young age, and I think he's got broad shoulders. I think the hooligan trouble was going to be alright because I think Putin will keep a lid on it, and so there'll be less fans there. Hot weather, yeah, sure, but you know, modern sports science is so good, everyone will be really well hydrated, and I think it's not going to be as hot as, say, Korea was. And then the other ones I'm less worried about. But anyway, that is my take on SWOT analysis for the England team. I was aiming for 10 or 15 minutes. It's more like half an hour. I can talk about England all day long. I probably will spend several evenings in the pub doing just that. I hope you enjoy the World Cup. I'd like England to obviously win it. I don't expect them to. I would like them to get to the quarterfinals and have a good game. You know, if they can show some spirit, show some technical ability, so show some progressive football, I'll be delighted. And it's possible to beat anyone. You know, in a one-off game, if we gain some momentum, there's no reason why we can't beat a Brazil or Germany. and then who knows. But I don't want to put any pressure on the England team, so for now I'd just like to say good luck, and to everyone watching this, if you support England or not, I hope you enjoy the World Cup. I hope it's going to be a fantastic tournament.